Okay, so let me go to the video. So this is going to be a little mini lecture about how to calculate kilocalories in food. So we all know that food gives us energy. So what exactly is energy and how is that energy in our food? Okay, and how do we figure out how much energy is in food? You might realize that some food that we eat can give us more energy than other foods. So how is this all determined? So energy is basically the capacity to do work, and the energy in our food is actually stored in the chemical bonds within the food. Okay, so energy in food is measured in a unit that's called kilocalories, and on our food labels, what we are used to seeing is just calories, not kilocalories. And so calories with a capital C is the equivalent of a kilocalorie. So in a kilo, of course, is 1,000 calories. So what is a kilocalorie? A kilocalorie is the amount of energy that's required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Okay, and so how do we figure out how much energy or how many kilocalories are actually in our food? Well, it turns out there's a couple of different ways that we can determine this. And one way is to use a machine that can actually directly measure that heat energy that is given off when those chemical bonds are broken down. And so the first method that can be used is to use this calorimeter. A calorimeter is a device that measures the amount of kilocalories in our food. And it looks a little bit like this on your screen. You see, this is a bomb calorimeter. It has a bomb chamber, which is an isolated system. You would place the food sample that you want to measure in the center of this, and then you actually apply an electrical current to this and you ignite it. And so in order to figure out how much energy is found in those bonds, you completely oxidize this. Essentially, you burn the food and you measure how much heat is given off when you completely oxidize that piece of food. You can measure the change in temperature from the beginning of the experiment before you've oxidized the food to the end when you've completely burned this sample. And that difference is the amount of kilocalories that was found within those bonds. This on the right here, you see an industrial calorimeter. So this would be something that a company in the food industry might use to directly measure the amount of heat that can be given off. In other words, the amount of heat energy that is present in food. Okay. As I said, there's two ways to measure energy in food. One is using calorimetry, and the other is to determine the macronutrient composition of the food and to then indirectly calculate how much energy is found in that food based on how much protein, how much fat, and how many carbohydrates are present in the food. It turns out that there's a known amount of energy found in a gram of protein, a gram of carbohydrates, or a gram of fat. For carbohydrates, it's known that there are 4 kilocalories per gram. So if you eat a gram of carbohydrates, you should get the equivalent of 4 kilocalories. Protein contains 4 kilocalories per gram. So if you eat a gram of protein, pure protein, you're going to get roughly 4 kilocalories of energy. And then finally, fat, which we all know gives us lots and lots of energy, has more than double that. So it's got 9 kilocalories per gram of fat. So if we were to eat 1 gram of fat, we would get 9 kilocalories of energy. So if we can analyze our food and determine how much fat, how many grams of carbs, how many grams of protein is present in the food, we can then calculate what the total amount of energy in that food is. Okay, so let's take a look here at that calculation. Let's just for a second take an imaginary food. Let's imagine we have a granola bar. And let's say that this granola bar has let's say 10 grams of protein. It's a high protein granola bar. If you've got 10 grams, we can figure out the total number of kilocalories by multiplying 4 kilocalories per gram times 10 grams. I'm going to draw this in. 10, and this gives us a total of 40 kilocalories that are coming from the protein. Okay, let's say that this granola bar has got 20 grams, it's got a lot of sugar, 20 grams of carbohydrate. Okay, so we can then multiply 4 kilocalories per gram times 20 grams, and that gives us 80 kilocalories that come from carbs. Let's say that this has 5 grams of fat. Okay, so we have 5 grams of fat in this granola bar. We multiply 9 times 5, we get 45, I think. All right. And so this is the total number of kilocalories that come from fat. Now, if I want to figure out how many total kilocalories there are, I simply add the kilocalories from protein, the kilocalories from carbs, and the kilocalories from fat. And I get the total 165. So this means there are roughly 165 kilocalories in that granola bar. Okay? So let's see if you can do the same. So let's say I've got a half a cup of oatmeal and it's got 12 grams of carbs, 3 grams of protein, and 0 grams of fat. Take a minute and see if you can calculate the total kilocalories in this food. And you can pause the video there, but we'll just jump straight to and see if we can do this. So if we've got 12 grams of carbs, we know that each gram of carb has 4 kcal per gram. So we're going to multiply 4 kilocalories per gram times 12 grams. And that gives us 48 kilocalories that come from carbs. Okay. For protein, how many grams do we, or how many kilocalories per gram? Remember back, it's also 4. So we have 4 kilocalories per gram. And we're going to multiply this by 3 grams of protein. And we get from that, of course, 3 times 4, 12 kilocalories. Okay, and then of course the last one is fat. We have 0 grams of fat, but if we had a gram of fat, we need to remember that there are 9 kilocalories per gram. Here in this case we have 0, so there will be 0 kilocalories coming from fat. So in this case, if we add 48 plus 12, we get a total of 60. So hopefully you got 60 kilocalories. Okay, so that completes the video, the little mini lecture on how to calculate the total amount of kilocalories in our food. I would expect you to be able to calculate this given the certain number of carbs, protein, and fat in a particular food. Please email me if you have any questions. All right. That